Hello, you're watching World Talks on TVP World. My name is Sasha Farbach. The world's eyes are once again on Istanbul as the third round of peace talks between Russia and Ukraine unfolded on Wednesday. At Çırağan Palace, delegates from both countries, under the mediation of Turkey, convened to continue their tense negotiations, but despite the hope of breakthroughs, significant progress remained elusive. Now, in an outcome of limited success, the two sides agreed to an exchange of prisoners of war, an essential step forward, though larger peace concerns still hang in the balance. Now, with the backdrop of mounting casualties, shifting global pressures, and no clear ceasefire in sight, the question remains, will these talks pave the way to any lasting resolution in the future? Now, to analyze it all, we're joined by Volodymyr Yermolenko, editor-in-chief, UkraineWorld.org. Thank you so much for joining us. Welcome to TVP World. Your first takeaway, I mean, this was significant in the sense it was another meeting between the two sides, but it didn't even last an hour as far as I understood. What's your main takeaway from this latest meeting between the two sides?
Look, I think these meetings are important because they really can solve very practical issues like prisoner exchange, and Ukraine is also making some very concrete demands about the return of Ukrainian children. We know that dozens of thousands of them were kidnapped by Russia, but there is no illusion that they can lead to any ceasefire because Russia doesn't want the ceasefire. Russia denies the possibility of a meeting of leaders. For example, the Ukrainian side suggests that there should be a meeting between Zelensky, Putin, Trump, and Erdogan. And Russia doesn't want it because basically it believes that the meeting between Putin and Zelensky can only take place if Zelensky presents kind of a capitulation or, accepting the Russian demands, which are very maximalistic, which are reduced to just Ukraine renouncing its sovereignty, renouncing its capacity to have an army, accepting Russian occupation, etc. So unfortunately, right now, Russia continues to attack Ukraine, to attack Ukrainian cities every day. This night, there was a huge attack on Odessa, for example, and Ukrainians are defending.
Mm-hmm. As you said, Volodymyr, this was significant in the sense of this prisoner exchange. I think 1,200 of these. This is not the first time this has happened. Do you see, at least in this sense, this is progress? If you compare it to the other meetings, is this where there's the most potential for these kind of summits?
Well, look, it reminds me a little bit of this so-called Minsk process when there was this, in the frameworks of what we call a small war, the war that have started in 2014, which was much more localized, as we know, around eastern part of Ukraine. And there was a potential of that Minsk process because at that time, Russia did not actually recognized that it occupied the territories in eastern Ukraine, meaning Donetsk and Luhansk. It was proposing Ukraine to take these territories back, but on the Russian terms, turning them into a kind of a Trojan horse through which Russia will influence Ukraine. Now the situation is different. Now Russia said back in 2022 that there are 5 Ukrainian regions, Crimea, Donetsk, Luhansk, Zaporizhia, and Kherson, which are part of Russia. They are in the Russian constitution. So Russia doesn't want to negotiate about them. And the paradox is that even those lands that are controlled by Ukrainians, like the cities of Zaporizhia and Kherson and many cities in the Donetsk region, Russia says to Ukrainians, go away from them. Because in the Russian very, schizophrenic mind and schizophrenic constitution, it's Ukrainians who are actually occupiers because Russia declared lots of Ukrainian territories as their own. And therefore, Russia doesn't want really to negotiate. It says there is nothing to negotiate about.
Mm-hmm.
Therefore, as I said, it's important to have this context because we need our people back, and Ukrainians have a lot of Russian prisoners of war. So this is kind of this exchange process going on. But unfortunately, Ukraine wants peace. Ukraine really wants peace, just peace. But unfortunately, Russia doesn't seem to want it.
Also, in terms of looking towards the future, I mean, this is something that President Zelensky has said he would be happy to attend a summit between himself and Vladimir Putin. I mean, this is something discussed at this particular summit in Istanbul. Is that at all likely at this point? Is that another thing, as you said, Russia just doesn't want that? Are we closer, more far away from this? Is it an illusion? How do you see any kind of meeting between these two leaders in the foreseeable future?
I don't see it, frankly. So there is a pressure from the United States, but I think Russia is preparing to go through this pressure and to neglect it. We will see what Americans will do, because there are lots of warnings, but not so much of real actions in terms of sanctions. We will see what will happen in early September, when the Trump's kind of deadline will expire of 50 days, but there were lots of other deadlines, and nothing really has happened. And I think even if Americans decide to impose very harsh sanctions, which, as we know, there is a bill on them in the Congress, I don't think that Russia will go to will try to find a compromise, because in the Russian ideology right now, in the Putinist ideology, every compromise is a weakness, and Russians want to proceed to expand militarily to get new territories. Why? It's another question. Why they need these territories, nobody knows. But I think it's in in the psychology of the Russian imperialism today. And I think it doesn't limit to Ukraine only. We see lots of things around the Baltic states, or now around Azerbaijan or Kazakhstan, or around Europe, because Russia really wants to come back to the world order where it controlled the half of Europe as after the Second World War. So unfortunately, I don't see the perspectives of these meetings. Maybe something will change, but right now, it's not.
I do want to come across this point one more time. I mean, you mentioned that there is pressure, at least there's, that, as you said, this warning by the United States, this 50-day, I think, days to ultimatum from President Trump against President Putin. You've already said that you don't have much faith in that. Is there any way that this is also falling on deaf ears in Putin? I mean, he hasn't acknowledged this at all yet. Is this another, let's say, flash in the pan, or does this have more weight than we're actually not assigning to it now?
Well, I don't believe it will lead to peace negotiations when Russia will accept that it should, take a step back. For example, remove from the occupied territories or something like that. I don't believe in that. Again, the key question is the Russian constitution. There is not so much talks about this, because Russia made a step which is irreversible. It included the Ukrainian territories, 5 Ukrainian regions, into the Russian constitution. And as far as we know, Russia is not going to take a step back. So its demands are very maximalistic. And therefore, this pressure is very necessary, of course, but not with the aim to bring Russia to the negotiation table, but with the aim to weaken Russia significantly economically, because, of course, the war depends on economy, so that it just finds it economically impossible to continue the war. And this is possible because we see that sanctions are actually working, that Russian economy is really in a very bad shape, that there is a printing money and there is a lack of resources, and it doesn't seem really plausible that China will really bail out Russia. So there are problems in the logistics, there are problems with aviation, with railway, with everything. And I think this is very important. And Ukrainians are really glad that European Union adopted another package of sanctions. And of course, the United States should follow.
And we'll see if indeed the United States will follow. As we said, it's all very mercurial, but we'll see. Look, thanks for all that insight. Really appreciate it. That was our guest here today, Volodymyr Yermolenko. Appreciate your insights.
Thank you.
And thank you for watching. That concludes World Talks, but stay tuned for much more news and commentary right here on TVP World. Goodbye.